Understood. Here's a cold open hook. Rewritten with Judge Judy as a judge. Fast-paced and mystery-forward. With varied hooks to A-B test. Cold open hook, primary version. A single sentence from Judge Judy silenced a billionaire and handed his enemies the perfect weapon. His lawyer of 20 years suddenly started meeting the accuser in secret. His 12-year-old daughter came home in tears. Called the criminal's kid by classmates who didn't know the half of it. Contracts evaporated. Employees wavered. And then at 1:12 a.m., he saw an envelope change hands through a lit window and realized the betrayal wasn't a rumor. It was real, or so it looked, because the man he trusted most wasn't selling him out for money. He was being squeezed to protect a child. The real question was uglier. Who was pulling every string? From the courtroom gag to the manufacturer headlines? The answer would come in a warehouse with one light bulb and a text that read, "Your oldest friend." Alternate hook A, betrayal first. Judge Judy shut him up with one order, and that's when the switch flipped. His best friend, a lawyer he called family, started feeding the other side. Cameras swarmed. Stocks dipped. A daughter got singled out at school. And yet, the deeper he dug, the more the traitor looked like a shield. Someone was using fear as leverage, stalking a kid to bend the adults. The mastermind wasn't the woman on TV. It was the person who knew him best, the one who signed a message, "Your oldest friend." Alternate hook B, child in danger first. Before the court, before the headlines, there was a girl, 12, flinching at a car parked with its lights off. Judge Judy's gag order made her father silent, and silence made enemies loud. His lawyer, the friend who'd stood beside him for 2 decades, started cooperating with the accuser until a hidden recording exposed the truth. He wasn't disloyal. He was cornered. The plot wasn't a lawsuit. It was a net around a child. And at the center of that net waited someone who had known the family long enough to weaponize trust. Your oldest friend. Judge Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. One sentence. And the world's loudest entrepreneur went silent. No interviews, no posts, no statements. Nothing that could tell the jury by an inch. Reporters cheered. Rivals smirked. And the silence sounded like guilt to everyone who didn't know better. The hit landed fast. Headlines sharpened like knives. Clients paused payments, then cut ties. Inside the company, eyes dropped when he walked by. People who once high-fived him in rocket bays now whispered in hallways they used to sprint down together. At home, a 12-year-old came back from school with a fake smile and a real bruise to her pride, trying to protect a father who couldn't say a word in his own defense. He almost broke the order that night. Fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to post blueprints, timestamps, anything that proved the invention was his. But Judge Judy's warning wasn't theater. Violating it could flip a civil fight into a disaster. He powered the screen off and chose quiet over catharsis, even as silence kept feeding the wrong story. Then came the first crack, and it didn't happen in court. At 1:12 a.m., on a drive meant to clear his head, a glow in a second-floor window froze him in place. His lawyer, his best friend of 2 decades, across from the accuser, a thick envelope between them, a shake of hands, a clean exit, no cameras, no context, just enough to make betrayal look obvious, but obvious is rarely the truth. He slept 0 minutes. By sunrise, trust felt like a luxury he couldn't afford, and yet the part that wouldn't shut up was the same part that had built rockets from scrap. Something about the scene didn't add up. The friend's posture, the jitter in his voice lately, the way he'd almost said protecting instead of defending. If this was a sellout, it was the sloppiest one ever. If it wasn't, something worse was moving in the dark. But that wasn't the whole story. He parked half a block away, lights off, heart loud enough to step on, and watched the second floor glow like a stage where he didn't belong, because what he saw didn't match 20 years of loyalty or the way a real traitor moves. The meeting was quick, too clean. The envelope looked heavy, but the faces looked heavier. His friend's hand shook on the pass, the kind of shake that comes from fear, not greed. And fear is a terrible accountant because it never balances the books the way money does. He wanted answers, not guesses, so he did the worst thing for patience and the best thing for truth. He walked in the next morning without calling, watched fear flash and vanish on his friend's face, and asked simple questions that hit like hammers. Why the meetings? Why the envelope? Why the lies? The replies came careful, clipped, lawyer clean, but the edges frayed. Defending almost slipped into protecting. And when he pressed, the room felt less like a conference and more like a hostage note written with good penmanship. Something else was in the air. Eyes on the street, timing too perfect. The sense that every move was being measured by someone who was in the room, someone who needed the appearance of betrayal more than betrayal itself. He left with no confession and too many clues, and that's when the second decision landed. If he couldn't talk publicly, he'd listen privately, quietly bring in a set of eyes that didn't blink, a professional who could separate theater from threat. Because if the envelope wasn't a payoff, it was a payment plan, with fear as a currency and a child collateral, and that meant the next move wasn't a statement. It was surveillance, and what happened next would shock everyone. The investigator didn't chase rumors. He collected receipts. 2 days in, he had timestamps, photos, and a pattern. The lawyer met the accuser twice a week, always in public places, always short, always tense. Nothing like a payday, everything like a squeeze. The third thread was worse. 2 new faces with suits and shoulders, the kind hired to make accusations surfaced feel less optional. Then came audio. A mic planted where the small talk sounded forced captured the turn no one saw online. The betrayal was leverage. The friend's voice was frayed, asking when the lying ends. The reply was ice. Keep it up or the kid is never safe again. It wasn't loyalty that broke. It was freedom. He wasn't flipping for cash. He was negotiating with fear. In a single play, the story inverted. The man branded a snake was a shield. The envelope wasn't a reward. It was a reminder. And the lawsuit wasn't the point. It was a stage. The real goals were silence, isolation, and pressure, each push calibrated to make a father choose between his name and his child's safety. That explained the posture, the late nights, the almost slip, protecting instead of defending. It also explained a new rhythm of threats. Unmarked cars idling near school, unknown numbers timing messages to land when the house went quiet. The sense of being watched that didn't feel like paranoia because it was earned. But the operation was bigger than one coerced ally and one terrified family. When pressure works, it scales. Judges get boxed with off-the-record calls. Staff start doubting. Partners freeze. The silence order turned from legal guardrail into narrative noose. This wasn't random chaos. It was designed, which raised the only question that mattered. Who knew enough to orchestrate fear across courtrooms, contracts, and a child's walk home and still stay invisible? The answer wasn't the face on TV. It was the voice behind it. And the next clue would crack the system itself. The silence order had seemed theatrical until a new threat appeared. Off-the-record inquiries about the family's routines. Questions no neutral referee should be asking. And suddenly the harsh ruling looked less like firmness and more like someone else's fingerprints on the scales. Pressure doesn't just target headlines. It targets hinges. And courts are the biggest hinge of all. Boxing a judge with personal leverage and every unusual decision becomes predictable. The legal path narrowing until silence feels like the only safe lane. Follow the money. Follow the fear. Irregular payments tied to shell entities can launder influence. But a cleaner lever is family. One grandchild move like a chess piece can turn a courtroom into a script and a script into a weapon. That's why the rulings fell off. Why timing favored one side. Why a gag turned into a muzzle. The system wasn't corrupt by nature. It was contaminated by design, and contamination spreads fastest when good people are cornered. And yet, the pattern revealed something else. If fear could bend a judge, fear could also unbend the story. Free the boy, and the bench in shackles. Break the threat chain, and the silence order loses its teeth. So the target shifted. Not the courtroom speeches that couldn't be made, but the hidden pressure points that couldn't survive daylight. Because once those snapped, every firm decision would unravel with them. But cutting one string was enough. This web had a weaver, someone mapping out people, payments, and pressure like a flowchart, and the next move would smoke out the architect. The pressure web finally showed its spider when a message cut through the noise with surgical precision. The warehouse, 30 minutes. Come alone or the girl disappears. Your oldest friend. It wasn't a bluff text. It was a signature. The kind only someone inside the circle would dare to use. The pattern clicked. The public villain on TV was just a face. The real architect knew birthdays, passwords, business cadence. even how fear travels through a family. He also knew the lawyer's loyalty and Judge Judy's leverage points, which meant this wasn't random extortion. It was a systems job built by someone who'd been in the room for years. So they flipped the script. No grand speeches, no hero charge. Quiet calls, a silent perimeter, eyes on every exit. If he wanted a private theater, he'd get one. But with the audience he didn't invite, time pressure stayed in the copy to keep him confident. Everything else moved in shadows. There was talk of a decoy, then a better plan. Let him think the plan is perfect until the last frame. Let him narrate his motive out loud. Envy dressed up as justice. Debt disguised as grievance. While recorders did what arguments couldn't. The key wasn't force. It was timing. Let overconfidence open the door. Let evidence close it. And yet the risk was real. Masterminds don't collapse at first contact. They overprepare and expect cops at the corners. Arrogance is their blind spot. But paranoia is their armor. The only way past both was to let him feel seen and superior, until the lights snapped on. When the cars rolled out, everyone knew the stakes. And it clean and fast, with no room for improvisation. Because a cornered friend is the most dangerous enemy. And this one had studied them longer than any rival ever had. What happened inside that warehouse would decide everything. Careers, freedom, and whether a child's name remained a pressure point or became a promise. And the door was already opening. He stepped into a room built for intimidation. One bulb, too much echo, the kind of silence that makes footsteps sound like confessions, and a shadow that knew exactly how to turn history into a weapon. The voice didn't shout. It savored. Justice, he called it. 20 years of envy dressed up as balance. The kind of story bitter people tell themselves to feel righteous while they aim at a child. Keep the line short. Keep the heart steady. Let arrogance talk. He circled the girl like a lecturer grading a paper, explaining why taking was fair, because being overlooked hurt, why threats were pressure, why lies were just a game. That's the thing about people who need to win. They narrate the whole crime out loud if they think the ending is theirs. The first slip was small. His eyes flicked at rafters, the way paranoid men check for ghosts. The second was bigger, a handheld signal scanner, sweeping the air like a lighthouse. He felt the tick of a hidden frequency and snapped, realizing too late that confidence had made him sloppy. He grabbed for leverage, not a weapon, an arm, a sleeve, a hostage stance, just long enough to feel in control again. Doors didn't slam, they breathed. From 3 angles, professionals flowed in with the calm that ends chaos. No hero speeches, no reckless lunges. Just the choreography of people who've trained for the moment a story turns from voice to evidence. The promise was simple. Let go, walk out, live to tell the truth on record. But even cornered, he tried to hold the myth together, muttering about debts, about being owed, about how silence proved guilt. That's when the daughter broke the script. Not with bravado, but with a question no resentment can answer. If you were really my dad's friend, why are you aiming at the only thing he can't replace? For a breath, the mask cracked. Old memories made his grip loose. Timing took care of the rest. Impact, disarm, secure, the kind of end that leaves no bruised witnesses and no room for maybe. In the quiet that followed, the room felt different, not like a trap, but like a stage where the play had run out of pages. The tape had enough. The motive had a voice. The plan had an author. Outside, the night didn't cheer. It exhaled. Inside, the lines were finally straight. The friend who lied was a protector under pressure. The judge was a parent boxing by threats, and the mastermind was just a man who let jealousy hollow him out until fear did the rest. And what happened next would flip the public story, not with rage, but with receipts. By morning, the narrative flipped from whispers to evidence. The public face folded first, arrested, charged, and suddenly very talkative when the recordings came out. The coerced meetings, the timed messages, the stalking. All of it mapped to a script designed to keep a father silent, while squeezing the people around him. No speeches, just receipts. The friend who looked like a traitor finally got to say it out loud. He lied to protect a child, not to cash a favor. The lies weren't loyalty broken. They were loyalty under a blade. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He asked for daylight, and daylight did the heavy lifting. The same scenes that once looked incriminating now read like survival. the envelope as leverage, the meetings as proof of pressure, the tired eyes as signs of man trying to carry a weight alone. The bench untangled next. Once the threat line was cut and the family member was safe, rulings that felt harsh started getting context. Unusual orders made sense when fear was part of the equation. Compromise doesn't always mean corrupt. Sometimes it means cornered. With the pressure gone, the gavel finally sounded like it was supposed to. Neutral, not nudged. Inside the company, the temperature changed. People who'd gone quiet started making eye contact again. Paul's contract restarted. The cold edge in corridors softened when the truth moved faster than the rumor mill. It wasn't instant. Trust never is. But momentum shifted from defense to repair. Clear memos, clear timelines, clear wins in the open. As for Mastermind, the motive didn't hide. Envy dressed up as justice never survives a microphone. He tried to argue that silence proved guilt and threats were just leverage. The tape did what counterarguments couldn't. It turned rationalizations into confessions. It also did something rarer. It drew a clean line between anger and action, between grievance and harm. The final choice wasn't rage. It was boundaries. Make room for accountability without feeding the cycle. Let the law handle punishment. Let the family handle healing. The daughter set the tone first. Brave enough to face danger, wise enough to push her compassion, and clear enough to know that forgiveness and access aren't the same thing. Grace doesn't mean open doors. It means closed ones that aren't slammed. In the end, the win wasn't about clapping back louder than the internet. It was about proof beating performance, patience outlasting panic, and people choosing courage over spectacle. The case didn't end with vengeance. It ended with clarity, and that's what lasts when the headlines move on. Healing began where the noise stopped. Calm kitchens, quiet car rides, and small conversations that rebuilt what fear tried to break. Because repair lives in routines, not press conferences. The friend who lied didn't ask to be celebrated. He asked to be useful again, and usefulness turned out to be the right bridge. Document everything. Set up protocols. Formalize never again so no one has to improvise under pressure. Judge Judy's name no longer hung over the story like a verdict. Once family threats were neutralized, decisions returned to center, reminding everyone that even strong benches wobble when someone shakes the floor beneath them. The company put structure where trust had frayed. Tighter access, fewer single points of failure, mandatory dual controls on sensitive files, and a rule that pressure never stays private. Escalate early, document always. At home, hope found its voice again in a 12-year-old who had already learned what many adults forget. Courage without caution is a dare, but courage with wisdom is a plan. Forgiveness entered the room carefully, not as a shortcut, but as a boundary. Human enough to see a broken man's regret. Disciplined enough to leave accountability to the law. The Mastermind story didn't get the ending he wrote, but it got a different kind of second act. Time to face consequences, and time to choose whether intelligence becomes service instead of a weapon. And the last image lingered for a reason. A sky full of distant points of light, each one a reminder that truth travels farther than noise when people keep showing up for one another, day after day, quietly and on purpose. Here's what the story revealed without ever slowing down. Silence can look like guilt when the wrong people are writing the script, but proof outruns performance when patience and planning line up. The betrayal wasn't a sellout. It was a shield under pressure. The harsh rulings weren't born from bias. They were bent by threats. And the Mastermind wasn't the loudest face on camera. It was the quietest voice with the oldest access. 3 choices made the difference. Choose receipts over rage. Evidence beats outrage every time, especially when enemies feed on noise. Choose boundaries over bitterness. Accountability belongs to the law. Healing belongs to the family. Choose courage with caution. Bold moves, yes, but only with timing, backup, and an exit. In the end, a daughter's steady questions did what shouting never could. They cracked a mask, exposed a motive, and reminded everyone that friendship without trust is leverage, and with trust, it's armor. The public story flipped because the private people held the line. And the last thing worth remembering is simple. Rumors sprint, but truth has better stamina. When the lights come up, only one of them is still standing.